There was a necessity for us to know as Muslims, not only astronomy, but there was a necessity for us to know as Muslims geography. What is the best way for us to get to Mecca, to make this Hajj? So geography, astronomy was necessary. My respected brothers and sisters, inshallah, we want to deal with some of those navigators who came here long before Columbus, made contact with the indigenous people in this country, so-called Native Americans, so-called Indians, who made contact with the indigenous people in this country, and exchanges took place. Agricultural exchanges took place. Sculptures. Place. Got all of this information through rock carvings that were found here in the United States, down in Mexico, Central America, so on and so forth. We got this information from eyewitness reports. We got this information from artifacts that were found. We got this information from Arabic documents. We got this information from maps. We got this information from even the Kafir himself. Even the Kafir himself, who knew this information. And remember, a Kafir, they know the truth and they cover it up. That's the nature of a Kafir. They know the truth and they cover it up. The implication is they recognize what the truth is. Because you don't cover up what you don't know. Their covering this thing up is based on the recognition that this is the thing they don't want to deal with. So it's a covering up of this truth. And it's also to make sure that other people don't get next to this truth. So much of this information with respect to explorers and their own historians are coming out of their own works. Columbus kept a diary on each one of his voyages. They studied that. They know what Columbus said about his different voyages. They know what his son said about the different voyages. They just kept it hidden. So now we deal with some of the same stuff. Now all of it doesn't come from there, but some of it does. History will show, brothers and sisters, that Columbus himself was informed of America from Muslims from North Africa and West Africa. He was informed of it. Now before I get a little bit more into that, I just want to read very briefly. Because brothers and sisters, you know, we really underestimate what took place in Spain, or Andalusia, under the Muslims. For almost 800 years, the Muslims controlled Spain. From the 8th century to the 15th century, which means the 700s to the 1400s. And in 1492, another celebration for them was that the Muslims were kicked out of Spain. But brothers and sisters, what took place in so-called Spain, Andalusia, was something that was so significant that they want to keep that from us too. Why? Because when you look at our history as Muslims, what it shows is an alternative to the Kafir system. The Kafir does not want the world to know that there were people who built a highly technical civilization based on the word of Allah. They're secularist. Their thing is based on man-made law. They want people to think that the only thing that you can build that is significant are those civilizations that are rooted in man-made law. When you study the history of Islam and the Muslims, it blows that out the water. Blows it out the water completely. So there's a tendency for us to underestimate what actually went down in Andalusia, in Spain. These 800 years when the Muslims controlled Spain. I want to just touch upon it just briefly. And this in no way exhausts the information that comes out. We know, of course, the Rock of Gibraltar, right? Was named after General Tariq. Gibraltar, the Rock Mountain of Tariq. Gibraltar, right? So that was after General Tariq, who in 711 AD, brothers and sisters all around the world, Hawaii comes from a word that means wind in Arabic. When the Muslims got to Hawaii, right, they saw a lot of wind. What, Hawa? Hawa in Arabic, right? A lot of wind here. Hawaii. When they got to Russia and went to the northern Russia and they felt and they saw, in this place here, you got to have a lot of sabr to live in this place. Siberia. When they got to the Iberian Peninsula, so-called Spain, and planted their trees, right? They planted their trees, fruit trees, right? And they noticed that this is an excellent climate for growing citrus fruits and so on and so forth. Especially this place here, you can grow a lot of orange trees. Portugal. The Muslim influence is all over this world, but the history has been hidden from us. When the Muslims got to Andalusia, Spain, very briefly, in terms of architecture, the Moors built structures not simply for use, but equally for aesthetic value. Their arches and courtyards and gardens are reflected in the architecture of California and the Southwest with its so-called Spanish motif. Y'all ever heard that? Spanish-styled arches? Come on now. Spanish-styled arches with fountains in the middle of the courtyard, right? Muslims. The Spaniards were given credit for that. Muslims, right? Actually, it's Moorish. Actually, it's a Moorish motif. In Cordova alone, in the 10th century, there were 200,000 homes, 10,000 palaces of the wealthy, and many royal palaces with exquisitely designed gardens. Also, there were 900 beautiful public baths, and many private ones at a time when the rest of Europe considered bathing self-indulgent and a sin. You keep your body dirty. You keep your body dirty because the body is of the flesh, and it's of the material. The body is of the dunya. So therefore, the body is susceptible to picking up sin. So what do? You keep your body dirty. Because since your body is susceptible to sin, you keep it dirty. So washing the body is not spiritual. You don't wash the body. You keep it nice and dirty. The Muslims said, y'all got to relax that, you know? So it's like, right? So 900 public baths, right? 900 public baths. Finally, in terms of education and scholarship, let me say something about the architecture. You know, one of the things the Muslims used to do when they built houses, they used to see what side of the house that the breeze was coming through. Once they saw the side of the house that the breeze was coming through, when they would build the house, they would build the house with a window on that particular side. And then right in front of the window, they would plant fragrant flowers. So when the breeze came in through that window, not only was a breeze coming through, because that's the windy, you know, the side with the wind, but a nice aroma was coming through too. The Moors were equally impressive in stature and contribution at a time when even the kings of Europe could not read or write, and 99% of Christian Europe was illiterate. The Moors made education universal. And in the 10th and 11th centuries, when Europe had no public libraries and only 2 significant universities, the Moors gave Spain more than 70 public libraries, built Spain's 17 famous universities, and established an observatory at Seville. According to that particular book, astronomy, physics, chemistry, geometry, philology, geography, and math were taught at these universities. Also, artists and scholars formed professional associations and held regular conferences where the latest achievements of research were announced and discussed, which naturally contributed greatly to the spread of scientific thought. In addition to the subjects listed above, trigonometry, botany, and history were taught in a university where students from Africa, the Middle East, and Europe flocked. There are reports that women were encouraged to engage in serious study and that there were women doctors. One author states that Moroccan science and scholarship were an integral part of the overall Muslim cultural achievement which produced advances in math, algebra, physics, astronomy. He points out that approximately 400 years before Magellan's trip in 1519 established for Europe that the world was round, the Moors taught in geography class using a globe. 400 years before Magellan's trip that proved to them that the world was round, when the Muslims taught geography in the universities in Andalusia, they used a globe. This is in Andalusia. In fact, El-Idrisi, we'll talk about him in a minute, El-Idrisi Amor wrote a book in the mid-12th century observing that according to astronomers and other learned men and philosophers, the world is as round as a sphere. That's Idrisi. He also suggested a concept of gravity, stating in his book that the earth draws to itself all that is heavy in the same way that a magnet attracts iron. Now, for us, when they deal with gravity, is Sir Isaac Newton. It's Sir Isaac Newton. Now, many of these scholars, their names were anglicized. Ibn Sina, who wrote the medicine book, right? Avicenna, right? Ibn Sina, Avicenna, right? His medicine book, it was the standard for at least 200-300 years in Europe. So many of these names were actually they're given Spaniard names. So brothers and sisters, the first place where Columbus found out about these explorers and about this so-called New World was from Muslims. Muslims where? Muslims from Andalusia, and when you're dealing with Andalusia, you have to deal with North Africa, and Muslims also from West Africa. From West Africa. All right? And inshallah, we want to get into that in a minute. Also, too, Vasco da Gama. Remember Vasco da Gama? Vasco da Gama was a European explorer who was a part of a Christian order. And they said that the Jews and the Muslims were outside of the way of Christ. So that was a rationale used for stealing and murder and plunder. One time, for example, Vasco da Gama saw a ship off of the coast of Arabia, and they actually went and destroyed the ship, stole the items, and then there were pilgrims on that ship too, going to Mecca. And then some of them had to jump off into the water. Those who weren't killed jumped off into the water, so he sent his men to spear the ones who were, still alive. This is Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama also got information from Ahmad Majid from the west coast of Africa, who told Vasco da Gama about the explorers, the Muslim explorers, who constantly went over to what they called the New World. Right? Now, in October 29, something happened. In October 1929, a brother by the name of Khalid Bey in Istanbul found a map. He found a map. This map itself, the map was dated of 1513. The map itself, from what was left of it, shows such an accurate representation of the Western world that by today's standards, the only way they could get that accurate is by using a satellite. By today's standard. Because we know that these maps that they have today come from satellites. That satellites up in space take pictures. They take pictures. And they take these images that the satellites make, and they make maps out of them. This map that was done in 1513 by Piri Reis, a Turk, was so accurate. It showed the Western Rim. It showed North America, right? Because he himself had access to that information of Muslim explorers. Muslim explorers going across the Sea of Darkness and Fog. That was the Atlantic. The Sea of Darkness and Fog. It had correct relative longitude. You know longitude and latitude? Correct. It even had small islands in the Atlantic Ocean to the letter. Down to the letter. Columbus didn't have that particular information. I mean, this map was down to the letter, particularly dealing with the Western world, because all of it was not there. He showed the Andes Mountains. This is 1513. Europe did not discover the Andes Mountains until 1527. His map in 1513 showed the Andes Mountains. This was a serious map. But instead of the historians saying where it came from, like how could he have known, they just left that open. Well, they dealt with it before. Atlantis. The lost city of Atlantis. Remember that? The mythical lost city of Atlantis? You know. So that's actually what it was. But you know how they've done that before. You know, when they dealt with the pyramids? You know, remember what they said? Spacemen. Yes, definitely spacemen. Chariots of the Gods. Remember that movie that came out? The Chariots of the Gods. Right? That Martians came down. Because, you know, Negroes can't, you know. So Martians came down, and Martians actually, with their superior technology, Martians built the pyramids and so on and so forth. And then after they built the pyramids, they left. These were scholars. But rather than say, you know, they knew they didn't do it, you know what I'm saying? But it could have been them, Martians. So for the Muslims, it could have been Muslims who knew all this. You know what I'm saying? It was the lost city of Atlantis. You know, some of them have taken that particular point. Haji Ahmed, map of 1559. Proof again of Muslim exploration in the so-called New World. I want to read an excerpt, inshallah. This is called Before Columbus. I want to cite some of these sources too for you, inshallah, so that inshallah we can continue our studies, inshallah, on this topic. Before Columbus, Cyrus Gordon describes coins found in the southern Caribbean region. Off the coast of Venezuela was discovered a hoard of Mediterranean coins with so many duplicates that it cannot well, you know, it has to be, it's a supply of cash. Nearly all the coins are Roman from the reign of Augustus to the 4th century CE. 2 of the coins, however, are Arabic, of the 8th century of the Christian era. It is the latter that gives us the time after which, like of the collection as a whole, which cannot be earlier than the latest coins in the collection. Roman coins continued in use as currency into medieval times. A Moorish ship, perhaps from Spain or North Africa, seems to have crossed the Atlantic around 800 CE. Around 800 CE, a Moorish ship seems to have crossed the Atlantic. This is what he's saying. This is called Before Columbus. Now check out Al-Masudi, a historian, geographer. He wrote of a young man of Cordoba. This is Al-Masudi, a very famous geographer and a historian. Al-Masudi wrote this: some people feel that this ocean is the source of all oceans, the Atlantic, and in it there have been many strange happenings. We have reported some of them in our book Akbar al-Zaman. Adventurers have penetrated it at the risk of their lives, some returning safely, others perishing in the attempt. One such man was an inhabitant of Andalusia. He was a young man of Cordoba who gathered a group of young men and went on a voyage on this ocean. After a long time, he returned with fabulous wealth. Every Spaniard knows his story. Another excerpt, inshallah. This is from El-Adrisi. He was a physician, a geographer. All right? Now check this out. Check out what El-Adrisi said. A group of seafarers, this is in the 12th century. This was in his book that was written in the 12th century, the 1100s. A group of seafarers sailed into the Sea of Darkness and Fog from Lisbon. in order to discover what was in it and what extent were its limits. They were a party of 8, and they took a boat, which was loaded with supplies to last them for months. They sailed for 11 days until they reached turbulent waters with great waves and little light. They thought that they would perish, so they turned their boat southward and traveled for 12 days. They finally reached an island that had people and civilization, but they were captured and they were chained for 3 days. On the 4th day, a translator came speaking the Arabic language. A translator came speaking the Arabic language. He translated for the king and asked them about their mission, the Arabic language. They had obviously, when they went, when it says here, they went south, southwest, southward. And 12 days, they reached some of the islands in the so-called New World. Held for 3 days. On the 4th day, a translator came, speaking the Arabic language, and translated for the king of the island, and then asked them in the Arabic, what's your mission? What are you here for? This is from the works of Eli Idrisi. They informed him about themselves. Then they were returned to their confinement. When the westerly wind began to blow, they were put in a canoe blindfolded and brought to land after 3 days sailing. They were left on the shore with their hands tied behind their backs. When the next day came, another tribe appeared, freeing them and informing them that between them and their lands was a journey of 2 months. Of 2 months. So, brothers and sisters, in the writings of the Muslims, in the artifacts of coins that were found, proof of a contact between Muslims, African Muslims in the New World, and the indigenous people. It doesn't stop there. The evidence doesn't stop there, though. Another wave occurs. Another wave of Muslims occurs in terms of coming to the New World. And this is probably the most significant of the waves of Muslims who come here to the New World. Probably the most significant. And that was the Mandinka of West Africa. The Mandinka. You heard, remember they talk about the Mandinka in Roots? The Mandinka, they're Muslims. The Mandinkas are Muslims. But remember the empire of Mali, of Mansa Musa. And Mansa Musa, remember, was known for his Hajj to Mecca. I mean, he was known for a lot of things, but his Hajj to Mecca. He was loaded down. Took about 70,000 people with him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he took so much gold with him that he depressed the price of gold in Egypt. He gave away so much gold when he got to Egypt. The price of gold in Egypt went down and didn't recover for 12 years. It didn't recover for 12 years because there was so much gold in Egypt. He was asked, how did power come into your hands? Like, how did you get all this power? Now check out what he said. Check out what he says.